I think we definitely could have been more effective.
Yeah.
I think we could have gone over. We had them write down finding parts of parts, but I don't think we really were like. Our objective is to find a part of a part. We just kind of launched. I kind of launched into like the zoo problem, and which is kind of good because it was like just letting them kind of like explore it. But yeah, I don't think that objective was as clear as we could have communicated.
I was going to say the same thing. Of writing the title was kind of the first exposure we gave them to it.
Yeah.
I feel like, because I did this lesson twice today, I'm getting confused between what I said in one class and what I said in the other class. I feel like we stopped partway through the zoo problem. We were like, we're trying to figure out today. Like, today is all about finding parts of parts. Like, but I agree with Meg's answer that it could have been better, but I don't think we needed to belabor it either because we're going to come back to this.
Yeah. I think one thing that was hard that I totally did not anticipate being hard was the fact that you use the second fraction before the first when you're writing like an of statement.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think, I didn't think that through because we do that instinctually. I didn't think it through, and then I forgot, and then I was like, oh gosh, I have to make this very, very clear, very transparent, like that this process does this, especially for the students who struggle with conceptual understanding. So there was a time where I just pulled a kid in the back and I was like, okay, we need to go over this just me and you right now because this is really important, and I didn't feel like she was getting it in the whole room.
Yeah. I think we're getting off from your question.
Yeah.
But just to add on to that, I think is evidence for why they need to understand the concept of what's happening. We're finding parts of parts. Okay, what is our first part? How much of that do we want?
Right.
And so instead of being first number times second number, that thinking, they need to pull back from the rote thinking and be what's actually happening. So anyway.
Even one student at the end of class was like, wait, this is impossible. They're asking me to find 3/4 of 1/2, but 3/4 is bigger than 1/2. And so I was like, wait, slow down. I was like, draw it out because you're not drawing it out. And then he drew he drew the half. And then and then he was like, oh, I've got it. So it was kind of this, they weren't slowing down enough. But I mean, I think they got it. They got the objective.
Yeah.
They just, I wouldn't call it our most successful lesson.
I think the heavy visual component of the lesson, how we draw a square, start with drawing a square. Okay, cut it up. Do it with me. Let's cut it up together. And the whole shading and visuals so they can physically see what's happening with the numbers. I think starting with that is a thing that I want to continue to do with fractions instead of just going into okay, we multiply.
What I really liked too was addressing the elephant in the room, which was that there was this misconception that there were 9 animal cages, but they were all different sizes, and addressing that and being and having Kalani be brave enough to be well, I thought it was 1/9 because of this. Then it was great, I'm so glad you had that misunderstanding. Let's address that right now. And that I thought that worked really well. I thought that was an effective part, and then also modeled for the kids that these are useful mistakes. Well, see, if the planning had gone exactly as we had planned, it would have been a better lesson. But I think it just planning and organization is so important for us, especially in co-teaching.
Right. And I felt we sat down and we talked through this entire lesson together. We created it together. Sometimes I'll go make the PowerPoint and be we should do this, and Meg will be okay, but what about this, and this, and this, and completely make it way more substantial. And sometimes I throw her under the bus and I'm I changed it, I'm sorry. So we actually went through the whole lesson this time and made the whole thing out together. And I think that helped us be exactly on the same page. But we usually are anyway. But it was really helpful to have thought through the process together and thought of the materials and kind of thought of potential things that might need addressing.
And I think we'll need an extra day to wrap up this. Like we were reflecting after class, we're going to need an extra day to kind of wrap this up. But I think that's good though, because I think we're aligned in like how we're doing it. So I think overall, finding parts of parts, like I'm convinced that they got something out of today, and if they didn't quite meet the objective yet, they're on the way to meeting that objective. So,
is there any purposeful planning with regards to the groupings?
So yeah, we used the same groupings we used for last filming. The main priority was to get the students off camera who could not be on camera, and then I recall last time, correct me if I'm wrong, but we made it last time. The goal of the class, there was 3 different parts of the problem, and it was arranged by like how challenging it was. So we had A, B, and C, A being like the least challenging or whatever, and each group was assigned that letter without really knowing that they were kind of grouped by ability level, so that we could have it more.
So what the viewer would see if they looked at the class is that we were at some tables significantly more than other tables, which was purposeful with the groupings, because those were groupings that we knew that would need a little bit of extra support, which was also why the third adult in the classroom who had an answer key and who was looped in was at one of those tables. So, yeah, and that's why unfortunately I was off camera some of the time helping that other table.
Well, one of the things that I reflected on kind of at the beginning of the second time I taught this today with a different group of kids is that we didn't go over the norms for the modeling dough, which we said we would, or I had wanted to do, and I didn't and I didn't foresee making a square being so difficult. Last time we used modeling dough, I had them roll into a worm and flatten it, so they ended up with like a long rectangle, and cut that into parts. And I did not at all foresee making a square taking up so much time. And I think that derailed my like inside mentality from the beginning, which I think played a role in behavior management, because we were behind schedule, which made us rush, which made the kids who weren't getting it kind of like act out instead of I wouldn't say there was any crazy amounts of like behavior things happening besides that off-camera constant conversation between 2 students. But that little misstep of not reviewing those norms.
Because we had different groupings too, it was a little bit challenging. One group that was over here, the 2 students, in reflecting with them afterwards, were off task because like they knew exactly what they were doing, and they both said to us, they were like, well, we got the lesson, like we understood the objective. And I was like, yeah, but did the people around you, like, because you were kind of distracting, like, so I think like different groupings can sometimes switch things up in a way that can be overwhelming for the students, and if they haven't been with those people, they're less likely to remember the norms and come in the same mindset. And so I think that might have played a role in why classroom management wasn't as strong in this class as I feel like it normally is.
And logistically, I mean, they all had at their tables that they're at when we're not filming, so they all have individual jobs like we talked about yesterday. But at this time, because they were switched, the jobs weren't. All 5 jobs weren't represented at each table, and the students just had to step up, and they stepped up, but I think that took away from the ownership of like, hey, I'm the materials person and you don't have a material right now, or you're not using it correctly. It took away from the ownership of whose job was what, and that's a little detail, but it does add a lot when you can just count on one person at every table is in charge of collecting all the modeling dough. So that was another reason that I think these groupings might have affected their behavior.
I think it went pretty well. We like the I do part was I think the I do part was too long. We lost them through part of that, and I think like I think the core of that was that we handed out the modeling dough too early. And maybe like after we explained the problem, but it took so long to explain the problem because they were all making those gosh darn squares. And so I
revised that in the second the second time I taught it, I was like, now hearing that, I should just said, come get it if you need it. But I said, like, make a ball instead of make a square. And that way it's set up for you to mold if you need it. But I didn't push the modeling dough as much in this second time. And it worked a little bit better, but it was still distracting. I think the students that we had, as in the students who were invested in the lesson.
Yeah.
We're getting it and we're following and we're enjoying it and the visuals were helpful. I think the students that we lost to either the Play-Doh or because it was too long for them to focus, which is understandable, we lost pretty quick, or like we lost them and it was really hard to get them back. But the ones that we had were like, yeah, okay, I'm getting it. I'm cut it up. And then they could go into the practice problem and talk about how much, and then include the money factor, because the practice problem on their workbook was about money, and I saw a lot of kids working through that, so that kind of told me, okay, you were following and we had you, or you get this. But
yeah, it was a mixed level of engagement, because I feel like overall with fractions we've hit this problem where we never have before. We're used to going at a pace where we're anticipating misunderstandings, but with the last two lessons they've been like getting things like faster, and like so, but then because of the inclusion environment, we have some kids who need repeated instructions and modeling. And I think we lose kids when we give those students the repeated instruction and modeling. And those kids they've been on it. And one of the things I was really excited about in terms of engagement was when I went to every kid to check in, like almost every single one of them had a great answer or had like an accurate Play-Doh model to show me, or were clearly like, yeah, it was 1/12 and here's why. So like it's one of the classes where I feel like they really got it, but it was almost like they got it at such different paces that we lost them in different parts of the process.
Yeah.
Like
it felt disjointed, but I think I'll feel better about today at the end of tomorrow, when we've all had a chance to just come in and like just quietly start, like jump back into the problem and notice where you're having questions and notice where you can push yourself more, and kind of like let's all let the dust settle and kind of come back together and see, all right, that'll give me a chance to work with the students who, because Meg won't be here, the students who needed that extra repetition, and it'll give the other students a chance to run ahead. And I feel like having
something that we probably should have done is like, when you're done with this, we usually have like okay, here's an activity on IXL. They let you do 20 problems a day, so it's like it's a quick like thing for those students who get done, and we can choose an activity and we can do it, so we know it's at that appropriate like alignment level. So it's not like kind of like, okay, here, do something random while we wait. It's more like, here's an activity that's directly aligned. You're still practicing, but you're moving on to something different, so we're keeping you engaged. And I think I didn't anticipate that they would finish at such different times.
Yeah, me too.
And if we had anticipated that, we would have had an IXL activity ready, so that those students who were ready, there's a whole table over there who was ready probably 2 minutes. Doesn't seem like a long time, but it is for middle schoolers. Who were ready about 2 minutes before we actually wrapped up the do now to move on to the Browning problem, when really we should have let them move on, or had something for them to do in the meanwhile.
Yeah.
So.
And how do you think students found the lesson meaningful or relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I think they respond well to our like being silly about the wombats and connecting it to the park, and I think
anytime we can get them hungry, you know, that's always like a good thing. I think that's always a fun connection for them. I think like once we actually like, I think we're still working on that like real world component. Fractions can often be hard.
But you know what was exciting that I want to talk about next class?
Yeah.
This might not fully answer your question, but we had town hall after this class. We had town hall, which is we all come together, and you have to have 2/3 majority to vote on motions, and so 61 students were there. There's about 180 people at Seeks, like 160 students, 160 students and 20 teachers. And we had a math problem that talked about that in the previous test, which is why I think they're aware of that, and I was aware of it. And basically a third of the school showed up to town hall, and we needed 2/3 majority of that 1/3 to vote. So, and I just had town hall when I taught this next class, so we started with that of like, this is real world finding parts of parts. Like,
Wow.
2/3 of 1/3 of the school needed to vote yes to get this motion passed, and we passed a motion. So I'm gonna bring that in next time to really be like, look, like, this is a very, very relevant real world example of when we find parts of parts.
Yeah.
And I think short answer is that I think we're going to ask them to like retroactively find that connection. So we have an assignment called Math Musings that we give once every few weeks of like, go out in the world and like notice things around you that have to do with the concepts that we're learning. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to be like, go notice at some point in your life when you need to find a part of a part and figure out what that is. So that'll be a great chance to like retroactively find those connections. And I don't think it's ever too late to show them like, this is relevant.
I think it's also like one connection that we can emphasize more that I was thinking about today is like in homework completion. We've done some new things with homework that has really boosted their engagement with it. Like they're self-assessing. It's really exciting. It's really exciting. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really bumped up their engagement with homework. But you know, I think within a table, if there's 6 tables in our math class and 2/3 of every table did their homework, like I think there's lots of opportunities for do nows with parts of parts within like who completed their homework, and finding that, and also like being real with them and being like, as teachers we collect data, and like data shows us how we're doing and also how you guys are doing, and being able to be real about that connection and then have them calculate some of those things, I think is a further application of it. And I think like part of it is like, and as we are very transparent with them, we're co-learners with you. And as we notice these connections, we try to model it and bring it up, and then and it goes pretty well. But that I feel like that real world connection is still building, just because this was their first exposure to finding parts of parts.
I mentioned a few things about what I did in the second time I did it around. What else did I do differently? We somehow jumped into their own investigation earlier in the second class. We didn't do the second example up on the board. I don't know if that's necessarily a better thing, but I think asking them to like, one way, okay, I'm going to revise my answer. One way that I would push it is to force them to draw, like, yes, you're using modeling dough, but you need to have a on paper representation of what the dough is doing. Because if it's not helping you, then we're just going to put it away. What it can help with is like setting it up originally and then being like, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing, and then going on paper. So I think forcing everyone to like record their thoughts in their notebooks in that first like play around phase might have helped, and had the modeling dough come only if you need it. So like next lesson that'll apply where I'm going to keep the modeling dough on the side and kind of make it known that you can use it if you need to, but not really advertise that as much, because students will self-advocate if that's something that they choose. So kind of pulling back from, here's these toys, play with them, to like, they exist and you can use them if you need to, but you need to learn how to select tools appropriately for your own learning. So I think that's a way I want to develop this lesson further, is focus more on like, okay, you notice what tools you need, because these problems are so varied.
Yeah. And our Wednesday classes are shorter. They're like, what, 20 minutes shorter?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're about 20 minutes shorter. So having you in for a Wednesday class was interesting for us, because we tend to always plan for our longer classes, because that's what 2 classes a week are. So our shorter classes are kind of the classes that are more challenging in terms of timelines, just because we tend to think in terms of like a longer block of time. And so we try to squeeze things in on Wednesdays. We also have them right before lunch, which there had to be 3 kids during that math class who were like, so is lunch almost now? Like, it's just like,
Kids getting up to check the time and like,
yeah. It was just like, Wednesdays are just a little bit more challenging. Normally we have them right after physical activity, which makes them like super uber focused, come in ready to work, they're ready to sit, they've already ran, and you know, they're good. But this class period on Wednesdays is a little bit more challenging.
I'm thinking another way to kind of take this further is to, and tie in the fact that they're like restless, is to physically not just survey them, and because we were talking about, you know, collecting data and finding a part of a section of groups, but like having students physically split up in the room, like stand over there if you think this, stand over there if you think that. All right, of that group of you, raise your hand or turn around if you think this way, and kind of having them physically represent their answers to problems or to like survey questions so that they can get moving and be invested because they're part of it, you know, like their physical body is part of the work that they're doing. So trying to incorporate that more in these same types of problems of finding parts of parts.